This is Motorsport Radio.
1, 2.
Join the conversation. Contact the show on Twitter, on Facebook, and on our website, Motorsport Radio.
Radio, Motorsport Talks. And this week we're going to do a BTCC Transfer show because we are getting near to the start of the eagerly anticipated hybrid era of the British touring car. Now joining me to dissect the gossip will be, of course, Andy Hopley, the BTCC legend, and of course Connor Jackson. And we do have the editor of Endurance in GT.co.uk, Andy Lloyd, but he'll be joining us more to talk about the big news at the end of the show more than the British touring cars. So to kick it off, Andy Hopley, obviously Team Dynamics, we know they've got Shedden and we know they've got Rowbottom, but we also know there are 3 drivers lined up to enter the 2022 season. So who would you say is favourite to sit in that Honda Civic?
Good evening, guys. I hope you can hear me. And yes, Team Dynamics do have 3 cars at their disposal this season for what they've been after for quite some time. Obviously, there's a lot of names floating about, like, for example, Matt Neal, who's actually the owner of the team, even his son Henry. But rumour has it, Jason Plato is in the firing line to get the seat. Okay, explain that one to me. But that is exactly quite a few rumours. Tom Chilton's also rumoured because he raced in 2008 with Team Dynamics. But that's a few to be picking out, and that seemed to be a bit of a weird one, having Jason Plato mentioned.
It sounds like a PR.
It's a very big one. Yeah, especially bearing in mind Neil and Plato don't get on. So why would Plato then drive for Neil's team if they don't get on? You can imagine if Plato does go there, it will be very much of a interesting relationship in the paddock.
Yeah, it would be. But then that's what's been floated about, and we don't know exactly what's going to happen as of yet. But you never know. We'll see who gets the third seat. It's not been announced yet, but it'll be very interesting to see who takes over. And it's going to be good to see 3 cars back.
Yeah, because obviously Matt Neal's not getting any younger, should we say. But I would like to see him for at least one more season, and it makes sense to have Neil and Plato on the same grid. But at the same time, you do wonder, really, do you want to start your last season as the first season of the hybrid era? So it's definitely going to be a wait-and-see moment. Team Dynamics do have this huge pull because they are one of the most successful teams in touring cars, especially in recent years. So that will be very interesting. But, Shedden and Rowbottom, very successful last season. And it's looking like they're going to do it again in their Cataclean liveried Honda. Of course, don't forget, Honda it's not a factory team. Team Dynamics has been for so many years, but last year they did drop out of the Honda backing. So, Connor, obviously, Team BMW, Project X, whatever they want to call themselves, they're basically BMW, we're so racing. They've got Jake Hill from Ford, okay, which was a huge shock because, everyone thought, oh, he's bound to stay in because he did so well at Ford, he's bound to stay in at Ford. But there's, again, 2 more drivers to join him. Obviously, Turkington hasn't signed yet. Could Turkington stay in Wesso Racing, which he has done for so many years? Could we see Jelly turn up as well? Obviously, Jelly didn't have the best season last season, but he weren't half bad. So, Connor, who do you reckon could join the successful BMW team?
Oh, I reckon that brings me back a couple of years to an old sketch. It's got to be Turkington. I don't see any other reason why they would replace Colin in that team unless there's some sort of financial trouble. The major reason I suspect he's holding out is there'll be some issue with some sponsors or funding, as I said, that he'll just need to get sorted before the big announcement can be made. So I really don't think that's cause for alarm in terms of Turkington not being already announced for the team. The big question, as you say, though, is that third drive. Who takes the opportunity there? Jelly, I think, has to be one of the more likely candidates, especially considering how he was with the team last season, had a relatively successful run. Oliphant, though, was, successful in establishing a name for himself last season, I thought, more than Jelly was. And so if you're really going off performance, then has Jelly done enough to get that seat back? Obviously, Jake Hill in the team now, as you've mentioned, a big name scalp there. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think we will see a I hate to use this term because I know the touring car drivers, it's not all about this, but an effective pay driver in that third seat. Because if you've got someone at the likes of Jake Hill who have proven himself in recent years to be not just a good driver, but one of the front-running drivers in his years with MB Motorsport, to also assumably have Turkington with the team as well, they can afford to pick and choose whoever they want for that third seat. So in the assumption that Turkington is coming back, I say it really could be anyone, because I don't think Jelly's safe in that seat at all.
No, and I mean, you've also got Jake Hill, obviously brilliant driver, but brilliant driver in a front-wheel drive focus.
True.
We're talking about a more powerful beast this year for every driver. The hybrid cars will have that big boost of power coming in at certain times. It will also be a rear-wheel drive car. So we're talking, as we've seen with Morgan and Chilton over the last 2 years, they've really struggled to get their hands on the BMW 3 Series moving from front-wheel drive cars. So you do have that issue where if you have Turkington and then say, I know, another new driver coming in, you've got Hill and then in this other third driver who could be a new driver, two drivers who don't know how to drive a rear-wheel drive car. Turkington will be up the front. But obviously, as we all know, in BTCC, as in all the other racing championships, a Constructors' Championship is the one to get, because that's the one that brings the most funding. So that's where BMW are going to have to make sure they don't shoot themselves in the foot, where they brilliantly star lineup, but no one can actually drive a rear-wheel drive BMW. Obviously, Andy, we've got Team Hard, who are, as we know, a well-established team in touring cars. They've been around for a number of years, never been very successful, but they're a stalwart in BTCC. And of course they're back with that Cupra with Jack Goff and Aaron Taylor-Smith. But there are two more drivers. Can we say Nick Hamilton is an almost guaranteed driver in that squad?
Yeah, I suppose we could say that Nick Hamilton's going to be coming back to Team Hard because, he knows the team quite well. He's been there for quite some time. And obviously it'd be amazing to see him actually get stepped up in. Obviously, he's in the Cooper last season, and it'll be good to see him back. Obviously, just to put this out here, Bobby Thompson has leaked that he's possibly going to be back as well. That's definitely, I'm not too sure whether that was just a teaser or that he's definitely 100% being confirmed as of yet. But, Nick Hamilton, I don't see why he shouldn't be back in a Cooper. He managed to adapt very well. It was a different kettle of fish last season being a new car, but I think he definitely, deserves to be exactly back on the touring car grid. Yeah, I mean, he's definitely divided the BTCC paddock, because on one hand, everyone likes him. He's a likeable fella and he's very inspirational, but what he's doing with quite a serious cerebral palsy, you've seen him many times, he struggles to walk and all this, yet he is competitively fast. But on the other hand, the team want this Constructors' Championship, want to be up front. And, with four cars, you could easily be very competitive if you've got four big drivers. You've got Jack Goff, who's been at Team Hard forever, and he has proven he can, when given the resources, the front grid, etc., can go on and win. Aaron Taylor-Smith has proven last year that he was very fast.
but didn't quite get the results. New car, you can understand there's going to be a few issues. So, if you take Bobby Thompson as, yes, he's had a seat fitting the other day there. We don't know if that is because he's sitting in that car or whether he's just had a seat fitting in the Team Gazoo Racing Team Hard. So we don't know yet. I would expect he wouldn't go to a random team for a seat fitting if you're not going to race for that team. Exactly. But it hasn't been officially confirmed.
It's not been confirmed, but it's obviously just something we need to, at a later date probably find out. But
exactly.
The majority says to me the deal's been done, but it's hard to tell. The seat fitting is there, but is that because he may come back, or is it because, I don't know, it's hard to tell. But carry on.
I mean, there is a part of me, I don't mean to interrupt, but there is a part of me that says that if he's advertised that he's gone for a seat fitting without already having a deal in place, that sort of suggests to me that it's a bit of an advert, in a sense of, look, I went for a seat fitting, guys. And because even if he does have that contract, why would you announce it early? If anything, if he's going for seat fitting and we know he's gone for seat fitting and he made that clear, then he wouldn't be announcing that. He'd keep that as quiet as possible. So if anything, it seems a bit of a look at me, I'm still around, guys. And he probably was doing it for a private test or whatever.
True.
Yeah, it could be, because obviously he didn't race last year because of the accident. And we know he's been really good, really a really good driver. So it's interesting with Team Hard, because when they developed, and obviously with the VWCCs brought from BMR, they had a lot of potential. Team BMR had this dream team in 2015, amazing drivers, Turkington, Plato, Smith, and I remember the other, I can't remember the fourth driver, but they had all these. That's it, Warren Scott. And they had all these good drivers. Team Hard, BMR seems to disappear, and then Team Hard arrived with those cars. But they have never really got very far. Jack Goff seems to be the only driver that's actually seemed to have done anything for Team Hard. It's about time they do something in touring cars. I know it's very competitive, and I know it's easier said than done. But you've got to think, surely, with the funding that they're getting and the how big Team Hard are, they're in pretty much every championship in Britain. They're in the GT Cup, they're in the Brit cars, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're in. If I could just jump in there, because I went to the launch of Team Hard's new headquarters. They're based in North Kent, and I'm sort of just down the road from there. And I went to the launch of their new team headquarters in November 2019, and I think you make a very relevant point there, that they are spread across a number of championships. Now, I don't doubt their sincerity. They work extremely hard. I've got a lot of time for Tony and Sam Gillam, the sort of the family aspect. But you do wonder whether that spreading themselves across so many championships because they can get customers and they can make money out of it sometimes detracts from a really focused effort on a championship like BTCC. They kind of had this issue when they were in British GT and GT4. They were running a pair of Ginettas, and they were never really firing. And again, you got this sense that the focus possibly wasn't there. So I'd love to see them do well, but I do think they would benefit from a more focused approach to a season, rather than let's do everything we possibly can and see what comes out of it at the end.
Well, it has that aspect of it. When you see Team Hard Racing, you see these new Cupras, but they seem to be very underdeveloped. And even 3/4 of the way through the season, the cars didn't look fast. And you're thinking, well, they should be fast, because by now you've got the development and you've got the funds to do this. Team Hard are obviously quite a big company. So you're thinking, surely they should be up there with the team dynamics and, all those. I mean, last year they had Laser Tools Racing. They were backing them. So you're thinking, in a way, they won the championship last year, but in a way they didn't, because they weren't Team Hard. So it does seem quite confusing with Team Hard, but we'll wait and see as to who or what will be driving in the other Team Hard sets. I'd love Nick Hamilton. I think he's a great driver, and I think he's a great person for the sport, in the fact that he's basically showing that no matter what your disability, no matter what your ethnicity, no matter what your upbringing, whatever, you can do this. And the fact that Nick Hamilton as well hasn't used his brother's sort of sponsorship, he doesn't even use any of his brother's funding from Formula One, because he could quite easily have, Hugo Boss sponsored raced, you know what I mean, from Lewis Hamilton or whatever. The fact that he hasn't also shows that he wants to do this on his own. So it would be nice to see him back on the grid. Obviously, we talked a little bit about it, Andy, but what is now Team Moffat Racing what was Laser Tools? I don't know what their official team name is. It's like Team Moffat Racing Laser Tools, isn't it? But
yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah, they've got Aidan Moffat and Dexter Patterson, and then they've got one more driver to fill up. So I'll go to you, Connor, first of all. Dexter Patterson, he's obviously debuting this year in touring cars, but tell me a little bit about him, and also tell the people at home who maybe haven't heard of this guy before, how, what he is, how good he is.
Indeed. Well, Dexter is one of the many young British hopefuls coming through the order who's hoping to make a name for himself. 18 years old at the minute. He's had fairly good success in the karting scene before this. He was karting world champion back in his first attempt in 2017, I believe. He would go on to win the WSK Supermasters. For those who don't know, WSK is a renowned international karting series. And he's had various success back home. Back in 2016, he won the karting British Grand Prix. And Kartmasters have had a lot to do with his development over the years. So he's got a very good youth scene, as it were. I will say he struggled a little bit since his transition to single-seater racing, and that hasn't quite gone his way the last 2 years, unfortunately. So hopefully this is, I think, a bit of a new start for the kid. As I say, touring car racing is a very different beast to single-seater racing, as a lot of people know. But we've seen various drivers successfully make the leap across. I know people like Ash Sutton used to do Formula Ford back in the day. Even people like Jack Butel in the past have, raced touring cars rather successfully. And, it's good to see, more young talent making a name for themselves in the British Touring Car Championship. And it'll be interesting to see how young Dexter does. In terms of other memberships, by the way, if I didn't round down already his his skill in the past, I believe he's still a member of the Sauber Junior Formula One team, although I don't know how much involvement that actually involves beyond simulator work. So I don't suspect he'll be in line for a seat anytime soon.
Yeah, I can't imagine the British touring cars being one of the steps towards Formula One. I mean, I know it's a big championship, but I'm not quite sure they're in the same ladder. But yeah, it's a very interesting team, Andy. We haven't yet seen the car that they're using. We're guessing it's going to be the Infinity, but obviously they haven't confirmed the car yet, even though the Infinity has been seen testing. Obviously, Aidan Moffat, hugely experienced. They have lost Ash Sutton, which is a big shame for them. But, the third driver, could it be Carl Boardley again? Do you reckon?
I'll be honest here, and this is what I personally think. If Carl Boardley does come back, yes, I'd like that, because it would show that he's pinnacle in, obviously, rear-wheel drive machinery. He's there, but it's hard to choose who's going to replace the likeable Ash Sutton, because obviously now that Ash has gone to Napa Racing UK, it's going to be if Carl doesn't come back, it's going to be a very big shoes to fill in that seat if they are running the Infinity Q50 for this season. But, Aidan Moffat, the stalwart of the team, he's been there since obviously the Mercedes A-Class when he's been racing in that. But I don't know, it's going to be a big ask to see who replaces or who does get confirmed there if Carl Boardley isn't going to be there. But don't get me wrong, we can't afford a touring car driver, otherwise, we'd be jumping at that straight away, wouldn't we? But there's a lot of things speculation, but I don't want to jump in because it's very hard to tell at this stage.
I do suspect Laser Tools Racing will probably use this as a bit of a back burner year just to see how it goes under the new Team Moffat management, basically, and then we'll talk about 2023.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I think looking at the driver lineup, bear in mind you've got Aidan Moffat, who's still young, and Dexter Patterson, who's on his debut. They've not gone through a massively experienced lineup. Obviously, they're still to a third driver. We could, Matt Neal could turn up and be like, okay, so they've gone for experience. But more than likely, they are thinking of the future, not the present. So, you've got Aidan Moffat, Dexter Patterson. More, I would believe there'll be someone from Minis or someone from the Ginettas maybe coming up. Just to, new era, this new setup of a team. You've got 3 young drivers who won't get the championship this year, maybe not next year, but maybe the year after. 3 years in the team, they're still young. Yeah, exactly. Talking of teams that have decided to go against this idea, Napa Ford Motorbase. What a lineup! On paper, this is probably one of the strongest teams I have ever seen in touring cars. Okay, we've got Ash Sutton, touring car championship winner. Dan Camish, who's won pretty much everything he's driven apart from touring cars. Oddie Jackson, who's incredibly fast in the Ford. Sam Osborne, who's been incredibly fast in the Toyota. All in one team. And a four-car team, Ford Focus lineup. And Ford were very fast last season. So, Andy.
Yes.
Can we say they are guaranteed to win, or could they end up doing a BMR 2015 with all the ideas, all of the drivers, everything was going well, but it just didn't work out for them?
See, this is going to be 50-50 answering both your statistics. I think definitely it's a strong team, yes, because you got Ash Sutton and, of course, reigning champion. I was quite surprised when he announced he was leaving Laser Tools to go, and then eventually it came about he was going to Napa Racing UK. I think personally that sums it up to say, yeah, they've got a chance at the outright title yet again to get where they want. Dan Camish, okay, year away into Porsches, won the Porsches and now back in front-wheel drive. That seems a bit, I'm not going to say a bold move, but it's very much how it was when he went, obviously, in the Honda to then go into Porsches last season and then coming back into front-wheel drive. It's obviously trying to test the water, and obviously the deal got set in stone to say, you obviously want to have a good crack at the title, I'm going to have your experienced teammate Ash Sutton, and that's going to be very interesting to see how well the likes of Dan Cam and Ash Sutton are going to work, because they both fought against each other for the title a few seasons ago, and that's something that really is a key factor and a key point that we should address. But I don't know. I don't think they're going to be like you said with BMR, like it's all the gear, no idea, if you know what I mean. But I think personally, I think it's going to be a right combination. It probably could turn into a title-winning team this season. I'm not too sure. It depends on how, because it's all going to be new for everyone going hybrid. So it depends on who gets the best. And obviously, with M Sport coming in for the engines, you've got Mountune that are trying to do their own M Sport version, should we say, with Motorbase. So in a way, you could ask for more, really, could you?
I think Andy hits the nail on the head there, which is it's 2023, it's a new era, it's the hybrids. You're right. Any other year, if this was just 2021 part 2 or whatever, I would happily say this is the team. Watch out for this. Napa Racing will win the title. I got no questions, mate. But when you've got such new regulations coming in, such new cars being produced for this new era, then you've really got to say that the rule book's thrown out the window. There is no set order for this. And I mean, I think Ash Sutton has proven that he can be fast in anything, considering what he's raced over the years. And I think that's one of the reasons Napa did bring him in, which is that not just he's a very quick driver and obviously the defending champion, but he's good at adapting. Turkington has done very well in a BMW he knows for how many years. Sutton wins in whatever he goes into, and Napa wanted that. And that is one of the reasons I think he'll still be up the front. However, whether Cammish is still with him, I think that's going to be the real question. Does Cammish still maintain his championship run, or is this a season where he really finds out that this new car is just not suited to him?
Yeah, I mean, you look at it this way. Ash Sutton, he debuted in touring cars in the MG, which he then won him with. He then went to the Subarus, which he then won with. He's then gone to the Infinities, which he's then won with. He's now going to Ford. He's come from Clio, so he's used to front-wheel drive. Even though he has spent most of his career in touring cars as a rear-wheel drive driver, he is originally a front-wheel drive driver. Dan Cammish, front-wheel drive driver. Yes, he's done Porsches, but he's also done Honda Civics, so front-wheel drive driver. Jackson, front-wheel drive driver. Sam Osborne, front-wheel drive driver. They've got 4 drivers who have spent most of their careers in the front-wheel drive category. So it's not like any of them don't know how to drive front-wheel drive. Yes, the hybrid system will be different, how to drive it, where the weight, all this sort of stuff, how all the front tyres will hold up. But it is, as you said, it's a brand new era. You know, there's no way we can look back on last year and go, well, the Fords were fast last year, they'll be fast this year. Completely new development. They've been out testing, but they're not allowed to publish their testing time, so we don't know how fast they've been going. I mean, at Brands Hatch, there was a bit of a race that broke out between an Infiniti and a Seat. We don't know who was driving them, and apparently they were fast, but we don't know, again, who were driving them, how fast they were, all this sort of stuff. So all of this we've got to look forward to. But Napa surely have to be one of those, all the teams are thinking, okay, they could be quite dangerous. Going from one extreme to the other, BTC Racing, you're looking at them and going, well, anyone could drive for them. And they haven't confirmed anyone. They've not confirmed, they've said, but they are looking at doing a Honda Civic this year again. Brand new one, though, built by Team Dynamics. So, Connor, obviously BTC Racing still to unveil a driver. They've got 3 licenses to fill. Could we say Josh Cook and Jade Edwards will be 2 of them?
Cook, definitely. Cook, I will say that he's had such a good run with the team. He's a successful driver who's won multiple times. I don't see why they wouldn't bring him in, unless Cook has got a contract elsewhere and he's been, seconded by another team. In which case, I'm sure Andy Hopley will keep us informed of that news. But for the time being, I don't see why Cook wouldn't, still be the favourite to lead that team. I think the real question, as you say, is who goes with him. Jade, I think she did a good run last season. I'm happy that she's made the progress, but it's going to be about whether that funding's there. The funding was almost there for a couple seasons, and it's only just materialized for 2021. Now, maybe that was the breakthrough year for her, and this will be it, and this will be her touring car career, in which case, best of luck to her. But I know funding's always been an issue, and so we'll have to see whether that comes through. In terms of after that, who's racing for them, it could be anyone. BTC seems to be one of those teams where it appears to be that it's going to be a very middling team at best. It's not like it's a desirable Ford seat like we had at Napa or Team BMW, yada yada. If you're going to race with BTC Racing, you're wanting to race touring cars in the thick of the action. I don't expect anyone, whether they be Sutton and Neil or Nick Hamilton and Daniel Rowbottom. Sorry, that was Mina Rowbottom. Sorry, but to be winning races in them. But for the time being, we'll have to wait and see on that BTC lineup, because I'll be honest, it seems to be quite open doors, let's say.
Well, don't forget, obviously, Greasy, who was meant to drive last year for BTC, drove for the Porsches instead. He's been very quiet on social media as to what he's doing this year. he has said on a few occasions that he's very close to a return to the BTCC paddock. We know he's got a lot of ties to BTC racing. So if it were me, I would think that maybe Michael Creasy will be returning to BTC. So, I don't know. I'd like to see Jade race. I think she was very unlucky on a few occasions last year when getting caught up with being at the back of the grid and all this sort of thing. They had a few troubles with her car as well. This is a new slate for her. If she could get a drive, I think she has to treat this literally as a whole new racing series and literally go for it and try to get some points finishes on the board, because that's what secures you drives. If you can guarantee points finishes, teams will happily sign you. You know, they don't want to spend all this money on you to drive for them and you don't get the money back, because points finishes also gets the team money. So that's what it comes down to, and it's whether she can get sponsorship. But it would be nice to see a female driver on touring cars, especially with the evolving way the racing is going. You know, female drivers are getting better and better. I'd have liked to see Hannah Chapman do it, but she's signed with Mini again. So it'd be nice to see a female driver, at least one, on the grid. Accelerate, Andy. Obviously, Tom Ingram and Lloyd has signed for them. How big a signing is it for Accelerate to have Dan Lloyd next to Tom Ingram?
Well, like I've tried to think about it over the last couple of days when it got announced, I think personally, yes, it's good for Dan's stead for the championship, but also, what is that going to mean for Accelerate? Because obviously, you know, he's now going to be working alongside Tingram for 2022. It kind of suggests, and I'm not quoting rumours, but it kind of means, does that mean Chris Smiley's left the squad, or is he still going to be part of the squad? It is very difficult to pick. And, you know, they've got two other cars to confirm. One of the rumours I could gladly say that it may be possible is none other than Dan Zelos, the John Works Mini Challenge winner, because he was racing for Accelerate last season. I'm not trying to say that's 100% definite, but that would be probably how they would have definitely him in the squad. But, you know, it's very difficult to decide if Chris Smiley has left the team, where's he going to end up? If he's still there, what's happening with Rick Parfitt, and, of course, none other than Jack Butel. So, you know, there's a lot of questions to ask. But going back to the Dan Lloyd signing, I think, yes, that is mega. It's going to be proven a point because the Fastback is now in its third season. But to have him alongside Tingram, they could easily work together and they could easily set the grid on fire and literally say, right, this Fastback is now improved, but like we say, it's still a different level playing field for everyone because it's hybrid. But it's going to be very interesting to see who the other two are. Don't quote me on what I say with Dan Zelos joining the grid. It's just a name that pops up into my mind because of being Accelerate racer as of the Mini Challenge last season.
In fairness, Zelos has been a bit of a favourite of the Accelerate crew. Yeah, of course, for a couple of years now. And I think he's on their junior program as well. So I think he's still on that. So it's a good shout, in fairness. I wouldn't be surprised.
I mean, it is a big shock as well because Dan Lloyd was with Vauxhall last year, PMR. And PMR have said they've got a new car. And it sort of makes you wonder. I said, well, okay, so did Dan Lloyd leave PMR, or did PMR say to Lloyd, sorry, you haven't got a seat this year because they've got two drivers lined up? That's, you know, that well, as soon as I saw Lloyd join Accelerate, I was like, so how did he leave? Did he leave by saying he's been offered more money at Accelerate, for example, or Accelerate are a better team, so I'm going over there? Or was it a case of PMR saying to you, okay, we've got two drivers who we want in our team. You're not one of them. Go find yourself another seat. That's the big question, isn't it? Did Smart, who haven't unveiled who are driving for them yet, have they got two drivers that they're just not unveiling yet, or was it Lloyd leaving? That's what we need to find out, and that's what I'm sure will come out in the next few days or weeks or whatever. Because obviously PMR 2020 I'll refer you back to before COVID. Matt Jackson and Plato were due to take those two Vauxhall Astras in what was going to be a very good team. Matt Jackson basically disappeared. I think it was due to his sponsorship falling through because of COVID, through the COVID lockdown and everything. They couldn't fund him anymore. And Plato ended up sitting a year out and joining in 2021. So do you think PMR have gone back to 2020 and are trying their Matt Jackson, Jason Plato partnership again, just like there was at Racing Silverline in 2009? Andy?
Go on, Connor. I'll let you and I'll chip in a minute.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I think it would be a big shout, Josh, and I think it would be a risky move. When we're going into a new era with new technical regulations, do you really want two old boys who have become very accustomed in their way? Now, don't get me wrong, experience counts for a lot, but how much experience is too much experience? Type question. It'd be nice to see Matt Jackson back in the paddock. It'd be curious to see if he could make it back, and obviously he's a very fast driver, but he's certainly not, I don't think he's championship winning nowadays. Same with Jason Plato. I think the recent years has kind of proven that he's not really up for a championship fight anymore. And if PMR do have lofty aspirations, then that will be what they're looking at. I know it'll be kind of hinted at with another team in a minute, and I'll let Andy have his chance on that one. But we were discussing about whether a TCR driver would come over, and PMR Vauxhall, PMR ran quite a number of cars in TCR UK last season, and a number of them, including people like Jack Constable, had very good results last year. It'd be very interesting to see if any of them make the switch over to the British Touring cars.
That's a very big shout, and that's very interesting, because obviously they are, in a certain sense, rival championships. So it'll be interesting to see if TCR drivers come over to touring cars, and then it'll be interesting to see how well they adapt, because an NGTC car is not the same as a TCR car. Even though a lot of people think they're the same, they're not. They're very different animals. So I would like to see a TCR driver come over into the season, because then we can see genuinely how easy is a TCR car to drive compared to how easy is a BTCC car to drive. Obviously, we know the BTCC field is very competitive. TCR, not quite so much. I know there's like a pack of 4 or 5 drivers who are often at the front, but let's face it, that's about it. Touring cars is a lot more, but that's an interesting shout to say PMI. Yeah, they were very involved in TCR last year. Be interesting to see if even if Plato's not with them anymore, be interesting to see if they bring 2 TCR drivers up, new era, new drivers, new car. That would be interesting to see. Obviously, we've then got Speedworks, Toyota Gazoo Racing, which is a factory team this year. The Toyota Corollas drove the hybrids. They tested the hybrids. They were the car to show off the hybrid system. Andy Jordan and James Cole were the ones who drove the Toyota Corolla hybrid at Goodwood. So, obviously, they're still to unveil a driver. They've lost the 2 drivers they had last year. Rumours I've heard are Sam Smelt potentially might drive for them, and Rory Butcher might drive for them. So, Andy, what do you think of that?
See, that's going to be somewhat, and I don't want to jump in to speculation as of yet, but I feel, I don't know if I'm breaking up, but just bear with. Basically, if Rory Butcher and Sam Smelt do race, to have someone who tested the hybrid car, like, say, for example, James Cole, would be very much interesting to see exactly what's going to happen. But who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be very interesting to see if say, for example, Sam Smelton and of course Rory Butcher don't come back. But I feel like we need to ask. Well, that's going to be hopefully confirmed in the next couple of days, maybe weeks.
Well, I'd say it's very unlikely James Cole will be doing it, because as far as I'm aware, he's the racing standards advisor for touring cars and TOCA. Andrew Jordan, however, what's to say that he doesn't join a team? He's the one that no one really mentions, but the one that everyone really wants in the BTCC paddock. And why not join the team of the car you've been driving in public for the last year, Connor?
Indeed. There's a couple of what I would call big names in BTCC who haven't had seats yet. We mentioned Rory Butcher. We've mentioned the potential of Josh Cook coming back. Big drivers who have won races and we haven't had a seat announced yet. But of course, the one we're all forgetting is Andrew Jordan, as you mentioned. And why not? Indeed, Josh, why not would you have him back in a car that he obviously knows very well? Saying that, I think it's one of those big speculation chats. It's like when will Hakkinen return back in the early 2000s? It becomes a bit of a joke question after a while. It's like, oh, will he return this year? Will he return this year? And I would love Andrew Jordan to return, but at the same time, I think we need to not get bogged down too much in the will he, won't he brigade of a driver who has probably started to look at responsibilities elsewhere.
Well, one of his posts was a picture of a Mini Millia, which we know he raced last season, but he put the question up, will I be racing this year? Not, this is my new car for 2022. It's, will I be racing it? So it's one of those questions is he a Millia? Or could we see him turn up in touring cars? Keeping your F1 simile alive, it's a bit like Michael Schumacher after he retired. Will he come back to Formula 1? And then he eventually did. So, could Jordan eventually return? And if so, he won't have the Pertec livery, which we know and accustomed to Jordan. So it'd be interesting to see if he does return, how he returns. Will he return? Will he have a specific livery? Will he, will it be Andrew Jordan racing car? Like, say if he was under Toyota Gazoo Racing, Andrew Jordan Racing, for example. Whether that will happen. Maybe he isn't returning. The simple fact of the matter is, no team wants to join partnership with Andrew Jordan Racing, who will be probably preparing his car. So there is that. And then finally on the list, obviously, Sicily Racing BMW. I left these last because, interestingly, Adam Morgan confirmed himself at the Autosport Driver Awards this year at the Savoy Hotel with his car parked outside the front. But there were two BMWs parked outside the front. So there were two cars parked out there, but only Adam Morgan appeared to admit to driving one. So who drove the other one? Could it be Chilton? But as we know, Chilton was busy last year as well in the pure ETCR. As far as I'm aware, he's still doing that this year, and that's got more races this season. So could there be a clash there, in which case could Chilton go over to the pure ETCR championship, which he sort of developed and have built up? And in which case, who else would drive for that car gods Sicily Racing team? Connor?
I feel this is like another BTC question, which is who can we predict who's who in this championship? It seems to be a bit of an open question. I know we haven't talked about people like Senan Proctor or Jack Butel, who raced last year. There's a bunch of others I think we haven't mentioned. Aaron Taylor-Smith, I don't think any of us have said.
He's with Team Hard.
Is he? My apologies. In that case, scrap what I said. But yeah, my point is there's a bunch of regular drivers who we haven't really talked about this year so far, or even drivers from 2020 or 2019 who had to skip a couple of years because of COVID. We haven't talked about them. And of course, there's the whole promotion aspect. We've had plenty of Ginetta champions in the last 2 years, and mini champions, and VW's TCR, whatever junior series are coming through. I have a feeling with a team like Sicily, they will go for whatever is the best economical version for them. Adam Morgan is obviously a fantastic driver, and I would love to see him back. But I don't think he's the sort of driver who can win a team a championship. Nor do I think he's the sort of driver to just roll over to some big name to join his team and take all the limelight. So I suspect it'll be some driver we probably either haven't heard of or we haven't really been talking about as much.
I mean, there's something that I thought of a couple of days ago, and I suddenly thought maybe that could be it. Is obviously you've got two BMW teams. You've got Team BMW and then you've got Sicily Racing. Sicily Racing's cars are built by Team BMW. So could we see something like Stephen Jelly almost being demoted, as it were, down to the Sicily car gods in order to let someone else take the BMW seat? And could it be a case of almost like AlphaTauri, Red Bull in Formula One, where Sicily Team Racing is a bit like a BMW Team Mark II? What do you think about that, Andy?
See, that's another thing that we need to adapt to. Maybe it could be that. I'm not 100%. I can't really pick and choose exactly what's going to happen. But, it could be very interesting to see exactly who's going to be alongside Adam Morgan, because at the moment it's hard to tell and hard to pick who's going to be driving.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that obviously we won't leave, shall we say. We will leave it tonight, but it won't be it, as it were. It will be continue to be talked about over the next coming weeks, because, of course, there is a media day and there will eventually be a first round where we'll see the cars lined up, and no doubt there'll be a lot of carnage, should we say, because it's British touring cars. There's always carnage, it's always chaos. It's something that we'd love to hear, and of course Tim Harvey's voice and all that. It'd be nice to see it back again, because I've been watching the old DVDs and it's now thinking, come on, let's start the season a bit early this year, because I'm getting bored of not having touring cars in my life. So let me hear what you thought. But what we are going to talk about now is a little bit of a fantasy, to close the BTCC section of the show, a bit of a fantasy aspect, a fantasy debate. And I'll ask you, Connor, first. If you could have a team in touring cars, what car would you bring, and what two drivers would you have? Either obviously got to be alive. Say, if you were doing a 2022 touring car season.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, there goes my grand ambitions of bringing back the 60s and swinging it in that way. But don't worry, Josh, don't worry. In terms of a car, I'm very, very excited about all of the new hybrids that are coming in. But most notably, I'm always interested in the new BMWs, because they always come up with something very different, very unique to the rest of the field, that always seems to do a lot better. No offense, a lot better than some of the rest of the field, with such a different shape. You think of the typical shape of a touring car nowadays; it's very stocky, flat boot. BMWs continue to have this very long, elongated shape that still continues to do well. And I know, and I'm sure Andy will point at me and go, well, that's just a BMW thing. It's got nothing to do with aerodynamics or whatever. But I'm still forever impressed by that BMW. Every year it comes out and continues to do well. So I will probably have that as my car. In terms of who's driving it, well, I think it would be funny. It would be funny just to have Ash Sutton in the car, because not to put him against Turkington necessarily, but just because we've all talked about Sutton being the guy who can win in anything. Well, let's just have him win one season in the car that ran him to a championship for 4 years in a row, basically. It's in a sort of Montoya joining Ferrari type aspect, or Alonso joining Red Bull. That sort of comparison. In terms of anyone else joining, well, after that, it just becomes a case of who am I friends with in the BTCC paddock, and I think that becomes a bit biased that way. Be good to see people like Bobby Thompson back on the grid, but we'll have to see. I mean, I think Dan Camish goes very much underrated sometimes as a driver, so maybe have him as well. Bring over the whole Napa team.
And the same question to you, Andy.
See, this is going to be kind of how I want it to feel. Basically, for me personally, well, okay, I'd have to bring myself, even though I haven't got the budget.
Wow.
But the thing is, in all seriousness, yes, okay, my teammate would have to be none other than Dan Robot. Come on, everyone should have known that and should have guessed. But obviously, the car we're going to run is obviously the FK Type R, because that is the car that it stands out for me. It always has done from day one since it's been on the grid. But in all seriousness, if I didn't have myself, I'd probably stick none other than probably, gonna have to think about this, probably Jack Butel, if it was a real driver, to be fair, and not have me in the car. But, I'm not stretching the budget that far to have 3 Civics. It's too much. It's too much panel beating as well after a weekend.
Yeah, you see, I'm going to literally take all of your breaths away right now, because I'm going to do something that's going to be completely insane, never been done before.
He's going to say F1 driver or something.
I'm going to have a team that drives a Skoda Octavia VRS estate, all right? So Skoda have never entered touring cars before, and the VRS is one of the most underrated road cars on the road. They are fast, they're brilliant, everything. No one's got anything wrong, bad to say about them. Never raced. So that. The drivers, I'm going to have 3 drivers.
Greedy.
I'm going to go for Vicky Butler-Henderson, because I think she's always been a really good talent, and she's incredibly attractive. I'm going to have Hannah Chapman. I've always rated her as a young driver, and I think with a bit of Vicky magic, she could be turned into another great driver. And of course, Tiff Needell, who, let's face it, Plato versus Tiff on the touring car grid. We've always wanted that. We've seen it on Fifth Gear. We've always wanted it in real life. So there you go, 3-car grid, some incredible talent.
I thought it was 2022, Josh, not 2012.
You sure that the RS is going to be fitting the regulations for this season if you entered it?
Well, they don't do a hybrid yet, but Skoda will develop one. I will make them do that.
It's very interesting, but just to round up, just basically just looking on the Motorsport Radio Instagram account, just to bring this up, he's like Jake Sylvester 95. He said that he would have him as one driver and Ash Sutton as the main driver with Gordon Shedden, and the car he would choose is obviously the Cupra. But that to me, that seems like he's picked himself. But to have Ash Sutton and Gordon Shedden, that could be an easy combination, just because they're both obviously champions in that team. But we know how that's been proved with when Plato was driving at BMR with Ash Sutton, and then obviously Paul BTCC fan 21215 says Colin Turkington and of course Jade Edwards yet again in the Cupra. That's a mixture of talent, and I'll tell you what, that is an absolute good response. I'm not going to judge people who they want to bring, but that is exactly how you technically would probably line up. And yeah, it's a bit of fun to have a bit of fantasy in the world, but you've got to be careful that you don't overstretch your budget when you do get big names like Turkington and of course Ash Sutton and of course Gordon Shedden in the team, because they probably cost you more.
Oh, I don't know. Napa
Vicky Butler-Henderson will be cheap. Vicky Butler-Henderson will be quite cheap because, let's face it, she hasn't raced in a few years. It'd be nice to see her back.
Yeah.
And on that note, I think we should leave it there. we'll leave the BTCC section now. I think Andy Hopley's going to leave us now because I think he's got a very important Zoom meeting that he has to do, which is obviously more important than a radio show. But of course, let us know on Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Who would you have as your touring car team drivers, and what car would you drive? You know, would you go like me and go for something a bit weird with a Skoda, or would you go for something a bit conventional with a Cupra or a Discovery Honda Civic, which have proven to be good touring cars? But now we're going to move to the future, and I'm going to bring in Andy Lloyd because Toyota took everyone's breath away by debuting the car, which happens to be behind Andy Lloyd's head. And the reason it took the breath away, because it wasn't actually a car, which, first things first, Andy, I'll ask you, that's not part of the GT3 regulations. They can't build a GT3 car only. They've got to have a road car. Is that right?
Yeah, it requires homologation. And there have been... there's not been a vast amount of detail released about this car. Toyota raced the GT86 in GT4 specification. We know what they've done with the Yaris and what they've been doing in rallying, and they made this announcement in January. Not a vast amount of detail. I mean, the car looks stunning, and it would look great on any grid. I think Toyota really are reading the temperature of the GT racing world and seeing that GT3 is where the action is going to be over the course of the next few years, certainly in IMSA, with the way they've moved from GTLM to GTD and GTD Pro. And it's just kind of putting their toe in the water going, yeah, we've got an interest in that as well. I mean, I hope that they do, because they're obviously a very successful racing company, and it'd be great to see them on the GT3 grid.
Well, the thing that surprised me is that their GT3 car, I would have thought if they're going to do a GT3 car, they'd base it on their GT300/GT500 cars that they race in Japan, which is either the Prius or the GT86, as you said. The fact that they've just shown it's a concept, but it's a completely new car. It's a bit like, wow, okay, that's nothing what I would expect. But if you look at it, it's like a love child of a Mercedes AMG GT3 car and an Aston Martin Vulcan. It looks insane. And if it looks like that in real life, hopefully it will sound good and it won't just sound like an electric hairdryer or something. You know, but it's definitely going to, if it comes to look like that, it definitely looks good. But as I said, you know, it's all got to go through homologation, and we know how difficult that can be with the buy Coles issue at the moment. So, Connor, obviously, Toyota is looking to come into GT3. GT3, as we know, last couple of years, has just exploded. It's been everywhere. You know, it seems every manufacturer that has got a sports car in a dealership is making a GT3 version. So surely it's going to get to the stage where you're going to end up having to have, like, I don't know, you're going to have a limit on GT3 cars. There's going to be so many of them around. Yeah,
the Toyota announcement, as you said, is very interesting from, I think, Gazoo Racing most notably, because Toyota already have vested interest in sports car racing, and they have vested interest at the very top of sports car racing. Obviously, racing at the minute in the LMP1 category in the World Endurance Championship, and what will become the future of the hypercar category in years to come. And so to have a GT3 team on top of that seems an interesting direction for the company to go in, let's say, because again, I think Andy Lloyd knows a bit more about this than I do, but in terms of company spending, surely it's got to be, you know, more expensive than it's worth to run two different cars in two different categories.
I think it depends what kind of business model that they're looking at. If they're looking at the customer racing market and selling these cars, then it may well be they can see an opportunity in that. You know, you can take a GT3 car and pretty much race it anywhere in the world now, and maybe there's a market in that, I would be surprised if there was a factory effort, so to speak, and they were potentially contesting GTD Pro in IMSA with, a factory lineup, because I think they've got enough challenges on their plate right now with what they're doing in WRC and what they're doing in hypercar in WEC. I wouldn't have thought they would have wanted that kind of... They would have wanted those headaches. But at the same time, you would also argue that if you want to sell customer cars, they've got to be seen to be successful. And typically that means taking a factory team out, winning some races, getting some good results, and being an advert for selling those cars on to customers. So I don't know. Obviously, I very much doubt whether we're going to see anything on track or testing in 2022. And maybe they're looking at 2023, and I know we're going to come on to Ford, but that's an interesting development, and they're seeing an explosion in GT3 around the world, and they feel that that's a market that they would like to be involved in.
Maybe Andy, just to finish on your point there, that's why they've got the hypercar team and the WRC team, for example, is because that is the factory team that they use as the advert, as it were. And then, as you say, you sell the customer car, the GT3 customer cars, and go, well, look, we were successful in, performance racing, as it were. You might as well buy our car. We don't need to run a factory effort. We're good because we've already run a factory effort in other categories. But it'd be interesting to see where it goes. And as you say, the Ford news complements it quite nicely.
Yep.
Yes, it does. But just one last question on the Toyota. Obviously, they're going to have a lot of issues because, as we know, Toyota in America is technically Lexus, right? So obviously, Lexus have their own GT3 program. It looks like their GT3 program will be going on for a number of years. It will be interesting to see in the next coming years with this Toyota, if they try to race in America, whether they will compete with Lexus and whether that will be allowed. So obviously, you've got the Audi versus Lamborghini versus Porsche idea, and especially the Audi Lamborghini, same car, same engine, pretty much, but they compete against each other. So it'd be interesting to see how that goes. But yeah, as you mentioned, Ford, this has got me really excited because not only is Ford coming back to GT racing, but one of the most famous Fords is coming back to GT racing, Ford Mustang. We've got a little while to wait yet. 2024 is debuting in IMSA only, from what we've been told. But Andy Lloyd, the team that are building this, have got quite a reputation.
Well, Multimatic, yes. They're sort of, they've been Ford's partner in performance development for the last few years. They built the Ford GT. They effectively ran that program. They've probably got, they know that company very well, and that relationship is very strong. Ford are very deliberate and very careful in their decision-making process when it comes to motorsports. We saw that in the almost military way they planned the Ford GT campaign, announced in 2015, raced in 2016 and won Le Mans, celebrating the 50 years of the 66 Ford GT victory. And we saw the way they ran that program out. And there was a logic to what they were doing there, because they also had the Ford GT car to sell commercially, not as a race car, but as a road car. And they wanted to build that halo effect, give it that cachet of success, as it were, with that program. So I think it ticked a number of boxes. And I think that's probably the way they're looking at this Mustang program as well.
Yeah, the big question is obviously the Ford Mustang, which has been doing a good number of seasons in GT4 and has been dominating in a number of championships in the GT4 category. Okay, but Ford Mustang coming in 2024, we know there's going to be a GT4 Mustang in 2024. Is this a bit... Will this affect their winning ability if they've got a GT4 and a GT3 car, team, or will it not be too difficult to manage?
Well, we've seen other companies do it. We've seen Aston Martin, 2019 British GT. They won, if memory serves, the championship in both GT3 and GT4. So it can be done, and you can use your factory development drivers to develop both of the cars at the same time. I think this is Ford have made some very interesting points about this over the past 48 hours, and they were asked, why didn't you go down the LMDH or as it will be GTP route? And they said, well, we considered it very carefully. It's a great program. It's going to be very competitive, but we felt very strongly for Ford that to go down a GT3 Mustang branded program was the way to go. And I think this, from my perspective, this is very much a strategy that says we want to sell more Ford Mustangs. I wonder whether Ford can see the horizon now in terms of selling performance internal combustion engine cars and want to go out on a high with probably their most iconic car ever, the Ford Mustang. And they can see a program now that will run for the next 5, 6, 7 years from 2004 with the GT3 Mustang running alongside a GT4 program that will see them out to about 2030, when we know in Europe, well, if we go down the current route, you won't be able to buy an internal combustion engine car. So I think this is a plan to sort of cement the reputation of Mustang in a very competitive class, as we saw at Daytona 2 weeks ago. To come out with race wins, a customer racing program, and sell more Mustangs for the road.
Yeah, Connor, I mean, Ford Mustang obviously is a massive name. It's been a massive name in motorsport and on the road for decades now. The Ford Mustang doesn't really need much introduction. Everyone knows what it is. And obviously they've got the Mach-E, which is electric. Everyone was a bit, it's not a Mustang at first, but it's come on quite well and everyone quite likes it. The question I have is, obviously this new Mustang coming in 2024 will be a GT3. The current Mustang looks like it's aged quite a bit, so potentially there could be a new road Mustang as well. It could all coincide really well.
Yeah.
But the big question is that Ford Mustang is a performance car. It's a muscle car sort of thing. It's not what you would call a GT car. It's not an Aston Martin Vantage or a Porsche 911 or a Ferrari 488. It's you can't see it as one of them. You see it more as a sort of unique style sports car. So GT4 saw it as quite a good category for it, because that was where it's a sports category. To see it in this GT3 category, I can't see it fitting.
I know what you're trying to say, Josh, and I will say you're wrong in that sense. Ford have had a long history with powerful muscle cars, as you said. But at the same time, we've seen them run the Ford GT at GT3 levels, and I don't think there's any reason why they can't just bring across some of that technical skill that they've had in previous campaigns to run a successful GT3 outfit on this with this aerodynamic package. There's a lot you can change underneath the engine, underneath the bonnet when it comes to GT3 racing. There are limits, and there are only a certain amount you can do, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with how the Ford Mustang is laid out that would stop it competing at the highest level at GT3. The only real downside I can see is the weight problem that's going to be that would be an issue and would require sort of extra power to overcome. But as we mentioned, it's a muscle car. I'm sure it can handle that extra weight. I think the big problem with that will then come with endurance racing. While I'm sure GT3 is a very competitive class on the shorter endurance races, if it ever wanted to do For example, the 24 Hours of Le Mans. I think a muscle car like the Mustang would probably struggle at a full distance at race performance compared to other GT3 specialized models. But again, maybe there's something I don't know, but that's what I'll say.
What Ford and what the Mustang does have in its back pocket is the companies that will probably be willing to help. Shelby, for example, who built the original Ford GT40, and as we know has been part of Ford for a number of years. They know how to get the most power out of a car, but get the power on the road. So potentially they could be involved. But also Roush, who we know build a lot of very fast motors. They build a lot of engines for the Trans Am series, engines for the NASCAR series. So could we potentially see Roush, Shelby and Ford all coming together as this last hurrah for such a big name in cars, come together, all together, like a big celebration, as Andy Lloyd says? And, so we've got this Ford Mustang that's, been built by Shelby, powered by Roush, backed by Ford. Could we see that, do you reckon?
I'm sure we're going to see some fantastic starts for this car. I mean, I think from Ford's perspective, I think this is probably primarily aimed at IMSA. I think this is primarily aimed at the American market. I mean, I would very much doubt these days how many Mustangs you're going to sell in Europe, to be honest, with the cost of fuel nowadays. So I think this is probably aimed at IMSA. This is probably aimed to sell Mustangs into the American market. This is GT3. This is balance of performance. So you can take a large, heavy car and the balance of performance will enable it to be competitive against a light, lesser power car. So I think it ticks that box as well. The ACO is sticking to GTE cars at Le Mans, so it won't need to compete at Le Mans per se. I mean, there are GT3 races in the other classes and other races over the 24-hour week, but not in the main race. But you may well still be able to sell some customer cars into Europe as well for racing. So I think Ford have thought this through very, very carefully. They didn't make any mistakes at all, really, with the Ford GT program, and I'm sure this is going to be as well thought out. And when that car hits the track in 2024, this is not going to be a BMW M4 GT3. This is going to be quick right out of the gate when we get to the Raw in 2024.
Well, you'd expect it has to be, bearing in mind Penske have a lot of things to do with Ford, and Penske own Daytona, and obviously it's going to be at Daytona. So it'd be a bit embarrassing if Ford were massively off the pace of what is basically their home circuit in front of hundreds of thousands of what we can only describe, not to be offensive, but redneck American fans that would love a nice Mustang, and therefore you'd think that regardless of what happens, it has to be a V8 under the bonnet because it's a Ford Mustang. As we know, I'm very much old-fashioned in that sense. But we'll start a nice discussion, as we had with British Touring Cars, but we'll do a discussion with GT as well, because it's a bit of fun. Bit more difficult, because what I'll ask you first, Connor, is if you were to run a GT team, what car would you bring into the championship that hasn't already been raced recently? And therefore, what drivers would you have driving for you?
Oh, you've put me on the spot there, Josh. What hasn't been racing in GT recently that should be racing in GT? Just because I'm struggling to think of anything else. I haven't seen Maseratis in a while, I'll be perfectly honest. And I always used to like looking out for some Maseratis. So it'd be nice to see one of those back on track. I know the good old Italian engineering and all that. I know the company has shrunk quite a lot in recent years, and I think a program would be quite unrealistic nowadays. But it would be interesting to sort of see one of those guys back. In terms of drivers, there is a myriad of of top GT drivers you could have. I'll take a slight leap out of Ross's book from last week, where he said Nick Tandy is one of the best GT drivers in the world right now, and I think I'd have to kind of agree with him on that one. Just to keep the British run going, I'd probably say James Collado is the other driver, because I'm always thoroughly impressed with what he does in the Ferraris and the 488s. But you've put me on the spot there, Josh. I'm sure if you come back to me in 20 minutes, I'll say something a lot better. But for the time being, I'll say that.
That was actually pretty good. Yeah, I mean, Maserati have struggled a lot recently, but it'd be nice to see, I think, a nice Maserati GT3, maybe the Gran Turismo, whatever it was. Obviously, they've got the new MC20 out, maybe in a couple of years' time. Could we see that as a GT car? Potentially. It's good. It's been received very well, and I like it a lot. So, fingers crossed, Maserati could return to FIA GT racing like they dominated in the GT1 category with the MC12. Andy Lloyd, same question to you.
Oh, wow. Cars that aren't racing that should be. Okay. In my fantasy team, Gordon Murray Automotive takes the new T33 and somehow manages to get it homologated to GT3 regs. Whether you can do that with a V12, I don't know, but I'm sure they could find a way. So I have a two-car squad of GMA T33 GT3s. Driving in that squad, I would have Andrea Caldarelli. He's Lamborghini, of course, but I think you could probably put him in anything and he'd be competitive straight out of the box. I would have alongside him, I would probably have Johnny Adam, Aston Martin, but I'm pretty sure he could drive anything. I'd also have working alongside him in the second car, I'd have Darren Turner, Aston Martin factory, but I think he and Johnny could really develop the car very quickly. And as I'd have a young hotshot as my second driver in the second car, I'd have Seb Prio, because I think his developments over the past 3 seasons has been phenomenal. I think he is. I would be very surprised if he wasn't in one of the Ford Mustang GT3 factory seats in 2024, the way his career is going, and with the way that his family are so closely aligned with Ford and Andy Prio's involvement in the GT program. So yes, 2 T33s, Caldarelli Adam in the first car and Turner and Prio in the second car.
Nice. I'm going to go with the Ford Mustang idea by bringing out the lovely Dodge Viper GT3 car. Oh yes, the Viper returns, ready to eat up a lot of the European competition. I'm going to keep it American as well. I'd have Hayley Deegan, who raced very well in the Pilot Challenge in Daytona, and I'd partner her in the first car with Kurt Busch from NASCAR. I think he would make a great addition. He's always done very well handling the road courses in the trucks. In the other car, I'd have Kyle Busch, Kurt Busch's brother, who again has done incredibly well in NASCAR, brilliantly, and I'd have Max Chilton from IndyCar. I think he needs a bit of a rebirth of his career. I think IndyCar's he's gone down a bit down the pan. He's sort of become no one really knows who he is anymore. So I think nice Viper GT program might give his career a little bit of a. I
think he'd welcome your phone call, because I did actually read the other day he's looking to go into endurance racing. So I think if you rang him up, I think he'd probably bite your arm off for that offer.
I'd have to ring Dodge first for a GT program, but
not the Dodge Viper, because I stopped making those about 15 years ago, didn't they? But, I get the idea. It's a nice concept.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because you think about it. How many cars are racing GT at the moment? There aren't really any other sports cars that are not GT3 racing cars anymore. You think about them, every manufacturer that makes a GT3 or GT4 car has a sports car. And the companies that don't have a sports car, don't have a GT3 car, don't have a sports car. So it shows you just how big and how well backed manufacturer-wise GT3 racing is, that pretty much every manufacturer out there,
except to the most way. I was funny enough. I was going to say Lotus. Actually, I was going to say it's another kind of fantasy team, a Lotus Emira, which was launched last year at Goodwood in British Racing Green. Yeah, that would be fantastic.
I mean, yeah, when they were launched in Emira, the first thing I thought was, I know they want to go back into motor racing. Could we see an Emira GT3 2023/2024? So that's, maybe that could maybe happen, because Lotus seems to have found a bit of funding. TVR seems to finally be back on their feet. They're selling their Griffith now. Potentially, could we see maybe a GT3 program from them in the future, try to boost their sales? Who knows? But it's definitely a well-packed grid. And as GT racing is by far one of the most varied racing series I think you'll ever see in any motorsport. It's incredible. And Daytona was just proved that, last race and last lap, and it was almost too close to call even on the last lap. It was crazy. But that will be all. Obviously, let us know on social media, Facebook, Twitter, etc. I think we're on Amazon. We're trying to be on Amazon Prime. We're on Amazon Audio, whatever it is. We are literally everywhere. You cannot avoid us for too long. So let us know, who do you want to be for your GT3? What would you like to see as a GT3 car maybe come onto the grid in future? But of course, let us know. And by all means, contact us about anything, any news stories. I don't know, are you going to any motorsport that you want us to boost about? Do you want to be on the show? Please just let us know through social media. But thank you to Connor and Andy for an incredible discussion, who is, of course, editor of enduranceandgt.co.uk. Please check his website out. You'll find everything about Endurance GT, and I'm sure his articles are incredible to read. But from me, thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.
Good night.
This is Motorsport Radio.
1, 2, 3.
Join the conversation. Contact the show on Twitter, on Facebook, and on our website, Motorsport Radio.